Okay, well, welcome to your board. Now that you, my handout is on basically having effective meetings. So now that you've joined the board, you have the state law, you have your documents, you have Roberts, just in case you can't sleep at night, and you have the in-brief one, which can kind of help for an afternoon nap. Okay, that's where we are. You're a board member. You have to deal with this. You got a job to do, and some of it's quite simple and some of it's not. Okay, fortunately, boards operate in a much more informal way than association meetings. However, some of the rules are similar with respect to officers, so I'm going to take you through it in the handout. The first three rules, though, is know your job, be prepared for the meeting, and then do your job. Kind of simple in scope, but you've got to recognize the importance of making sure that, as a board member, recognize you are the example of good condominium living. You're not the mess up. You're not the one who gets the special parking stall, special rules. So be real careful that way. If you're an officer, you're even held to a higher standard. Okay. If you're a president, you have to know this stuff. Okay. You also have to know pretty much how to run a meeting. So you want to know if you've got any legal opinions that might impact the meeting, impact decisions. You got to know about your committees. You got to work with them. You have to be available to assist members with organizational questions. For example, minutes, parliamentary procedure issues. One thing that really helps is to prepare a meeting script if you're a presiding officer. Even if it's just an outline, know what to say, know how to handle motions. There's about 86 motions in Roberts. Okay, you only have to know about a handful of them. Okay. However, know how to use them and know how to demonstrate proper presiding with those motions. Okay, Roberts provides for about 6 different rules for steps rather for effective presiding. And I've enumerated them. One of the important ones I wanted to share with you today is know about conducting voting. If you're in a condominium community association board, you have to indicate how directors vote in the minutes for anything but executive session. So make sure you know how to do that. That, by the way, does include election of officers. It should show that in the minutes. Okay, there's 2 motions that are in Roberts that are very often abused or are not understood. One of them is a point of order, and another is appeal. A point of order is not a request for information. Basically, a point of order says a rule is being broken, and it's calling upon the chair to enforce the rules. An appeal is an attempt to reverse any ruling that the chair made and present it to the actual body for a final decision. An appeal process can also be used by a chair who's not sure. So if the chair doesn't know if something's out of order or in order, he or she can refer it to the body for a decision. Okay, one of the fun parts of Roberts is to say no more about parliamentary procedure than other members. That's why it gets to be kind of fun to be in the audience and to watch how people handle parliamentary procedure. But you do want to know it. You do want to have some knowledge of it. The big thing, though, that I found from 1,800 meetings is there are chairs who don't know a lot of parliamentary procedure and conduct a very peaceful and well-done meeting. How do they do it? Well, the first thing they do is they show respect for everybody. Not just the people in the audience, not just the members, but for the process itself. And they're able to balance that respect. Okay, keep in mind that this procedure is supposed to help you get your business done. For example, there's a parliamentary rule that says that speeches, debatable speeches, can be up to 10 minutes. Can you imagine if everybody had a 10-minute speech at a board meeting? You probably wouldn't have made this morning's meeting, right? So it's kind of important. The Gettysburg Address, I tell people, takes 1 minute and 40 seconds. Lasted longer than any condominium speech ever has. Okay, now that doesn't go over well with some people in the Deep South, but it is still a fact that it's about 1 minute and 40 seconds. I can usually do it a little quicker. However, recognize, get your point out, and that's why some rules, we find that the 10-minute rule doesn't work real well. So we have groups that have lowered that to 2 minutes. Some have lowered it to 5 minutes. Some of them have fought over 2 versus 5 minutes. And then 20 minutes later, they decided that they would go with the 2 minutes. Okay? Those things happen. If I give you an anecdote, it's something that really happened at a real meeting. Okay, a couple other things. Someone says, well, I want to discuss such and such and such and such. That becomes one of those kind of black holes of space. It can go on forever. What's the motion? What's the proposal? Now, boards have informality when there are approximately 12 members or less at the meeting. So boards don't need to have a motion pending before they debate issues. That can backfire on you. So consider that in your processes as a board president, association president, what do we want to do here? Do we want to have a more formal meeting? Do we want to have the motion? Be prepared. If you're going to go to the meeting and you have a proposition, have the proposition ready. A lot of work can be done in the committee environment. Have one board that has absolutely no committees. You know how long the board meetings go? Not an hour. They're about 6 hours. If the committees did the work, they could come in with motions that would be adopted rather quickly. You can make sure as a board, as an association president, that debate matches up with the motion. Ensure that whatever motion, whatever proposal, the debate's there. We have a term that we use in the practice now called parliamentary hostage-taking. Okay, now, it's not a criminal thing, but and it's not necessarily something that would be a negative thing. For example, a board that gets together every 3 months and they really enjoy each other's company, they get involved in talking about social issues, and before you know it, it's no longer a one-hour board meeting. It's lunch, it's a few other things. They hold themselves hostage. Sometimes they get into peripheral issues. So it's kind of important as an association president, stay on track. Here's where we are, here's where we want to go. We have a few boards that actually adopt timed agendas. When a specific time comes up, that's it. Debate is closed on any pending motion. We vote and we go on. And it takes about a 2/3 vote to suspend the rules to continue. So that makes it a little more difficult when they're in the middle of a debate to just decide that they're going to make things last for a little bit longer. Okay, when you're president, you've got to also recognize after the meeting, adopted motions, what's gone to committee. Look at your draft minutes. Watch out for minutes. Minutes have come a long way in the last 30-plus years. Minutes are official actions, not what my friend and brother decided to say or what somebody's upset about that happened in the parking lot because the camera was not working. Don't put that in minutes. Okay. Minutes for condominium community associations are very different than minutes in a governmental agency, governmental board. Keep that in mind. They are different. Those of you who serve in both should recognize that. And finally, consider as a president, what are the meeting dynamics? Did you get the business done? Did you make well-informed decisions? What can you do to make a better meeting? Never forget that you're a servant to these people. Okay, you have less rights. You're a servant. Vice president, sometimes that's overlooked as a vice president. And it is kind of funny with vice president because the general misconception is people think they're just the acting president when the president resigns or sells their unit. No, the vice president actually becomes president unless there's some specific language that relates to filling of the vacancy in the office of president. So you vice presidents, you could be in for a surprise. I don't care if you're a Supreme Court justice. That's the rule. And that's just what happened. Anyway, he was surprised. The secretary. Now, usually the secretary, in my practice anyway, in the parliamentary practice, it doesn't really have a lot to do. It's usually the property management companies that perform a lot of the tasks, or they have an outside secretarial service that I'm continually feuding with. So that does happen. However, the secretary is supposed to be involved with the call. These are Robert's rules in there. Items of previous notice, it's important to watch for that. Okay, if you're a secretary who coordinates with your president, you can work with a memorandum of items coming up in particular in proper order. You'll notice a lot of that comes in a board packet for management. You walk into a meeting, you shouldn't be opening up the plastic in the board packet 10 minutes before the meeting starts. It's a guarantee for failure. Just make sure that you've reviewed all of the documents. Make sure that you don't receive the packet half an hour before the meeting. And then make sure that when you do receive it, hopefully a week before, you review it and you're ready with questions or with proposals to accomplish various actions. Okay, there's another one that has come up in our practice. If the president's not there, who calls the meeting to order? Vice president. Everybody usually knows that. If the vice president's not there, who calls the meeting to order? The secretary. Everybody usually knows that. What they don't know is that the secretary calls the meeting to order only long enough to elect a chair pro tem, temporary chair. And if the president, vice president, and secretary are not there, you better yell at your board, right? Now, any member of the board could call that meeting to order. So it stops there. And then what do? They elect a temporary chair. Okay, the secretary is supposed to read the minutes when directed by the chair. We've taken a position on that. Reading is the minimum. If you know a little bit about Robert's Rules history, he was an engineer. It goes back to about 1876. And in 1876, they didn't have any fax machines, copiers, microphones. They didn't have any of that. And making 100 copies is a whole different animal in 1876 than it is today. So what happens is they would require reading. So reading is the minimum. So how do you exceed the minimum? You have written copies of it sent to everybody, written copies available. Okay, we once had an auditor who read the entire audited financial report. The whole thing. We got all the columns. Okay, that was over 30 years ago, and it has never happened again, and probably not on my watch. So you want to watch out for that. Sometimes you can reduce controversy by having a written report that's available and not getting into the blow-by-blow of every single point. Okay, there's a few things with respect to motions. At the meeting, some things that are really important is to make sure that the motion that's presented is exactly what you want. And if you're the chair, make sure that's the motion is what they've presented. We've had people say it one way, put it in writing another way, the chair says it a third way, and then there's a fourth way and they vote on it. Which one of the four ways is the way that motion was adopted? Well, it's the latter one, the fourth way. But anybody who thinks the other three ways are the motion is not going to be happy when you go to the next board meeting. So make sure that that's exactly what they want. Even if, as those of you who are secretaries, those of you who are presidents, you have to stop the whole show. Okay, I mentioned roll call. In terms of post-meeting activity, you should be the official record keeper. Sometimes, again, that is also delegated to property management. There are self-managed associations where they do keep the records with the secretary. Official correspondence or a few other things. Committee members, the secretary is supposed to know this information. Even if it's delegated, at the very minimum, you definitely want to know it. And the same follow-up rules apply. Okay, treasurer is entrusted with the organization's funds. In our experience, most treasurers in condominium community associations are not signing the checkbook. They're leaving that up to management. Okay, and they're definitely not billing owners. That could happen with very small associations or self-managed associations. Okay, the treasurer's report. That could be a real simple report. It could be a management report. Okay, it's not accepted, it's not adopted, subject to audit, none of that. You're not auditing every monthly report. It's simply filed. That's all it is. The only report that might be adopted is usually the auditor's report. Okay, so keep in mind that treasurer's report is simply filed. Okay, now if you're a member, which also includes offices, the same rules apply, but in a little different way. Definitely prepare for the meeting. Read the meeting materials. Don't wait. Even if you have an informal board, come to that board meeting prepared. Okay, with email today, there's a lot of communication that gets done outside of the board meeting. You want to be careful about that because, remember, owners have a right to attend condominium community association board meetings that are not executive session. And they also have participation rights. You're short-circuiting that when you go through email communications outside of the board meeting. So you want to tread real lightly on that. Be careful. Also, I don't want to see this year's problems show up in next year's legislation. It would be really nice if board members would maximize their use of the deliberative process at meetings, even if it's conference calls with owners allowed to attend. Okay, a few things with respect to complicated motions that I'll tell you. If you come up with a motion that's complicated or long, then you can expect that the chair would require you to put it in writing. And certainly if you're the chair, it's really important to know exactly what that motion is. So have it prepared, have it in writing. Okay, if you have a committee report and it's recommending any kind of action, have it end with a motion. You can put it in the information, in the report, but make sure that it ends with a recommendation. If it's a motion, by direction of the committee, I move that we do the following. Okay, Roberts for members recommends some familiarity with various rules, debatable versus undebatable motions, preference and recognition. If a meeting is organized for something that you're presenting as a presenter or a motion you're going to present, okay, you get preference and recognition. That means somebody else shouldn't be allowed to come in right before you and subvert you on recognition. Chairs got to know that. Members have to know that. When you're debating, watch out for personalities. Out of the 3 or 4 of us parliamentarians in the state who do this professionally, my daughter tends to be the more strict person. And what she'll do is she'll stop the show when someone points like that. She just stops it right there. And she's even stopped it with some very mild profanity, which I wouldn't have done, but she did it. And she sets the tone for it. What does it do? It says, hey, we're going to have some decorum here. And if you catch it early, make sure that people are not swearing, that they're not getting into what that person did. Sometimes you see this in nominating speeches at contentious meetings. Meeting is very contentious, and what happens? They start talking about the other guys. Okay, if you're the chair, you need to stop that quickly. If you're a member and the chair fails to stop that quickly, what do? There's a motion called point of order. You raise a point of order that the member's getting into personalities. And that's inappropriate, violates the decorum of a meeting. Sometimes there's a tendency to wait and see how bad it can get. It will. It just takes time. Because once it starts, we once had 2 septuagenarians who got into a little fight underneath the table, okay? And the police were not willing to arrest Grandpa and Grandma. So you know what happened at every meeting? When he said something, what did she have to do? Say something else, right? Okay, it went on for some years until the problem got fixed and she passed away. But that's not exactly the approach that we want for recalcitrant board members. Okay. So, you know, you want to catch that early. I told you the anecdote, something that really happened. Okay, one way is you avoid the use of an individual's name, avoiding naming people, avoiding saying you, things like that, and focus in on what's the proper debate points. Keep in mind, this is not like the national campaigns and political debates. If you're a chair and you're a competent chair, you're just not going to let it deteriorate that way. So you want to be kind of careful about that. Okay, sometimes when people are not well versed in public speaking, if you recall about a week and a half ago on Joe Moore at night, they asked what was the item that people were most afraid of. You know what it is? It's public speaking. People are most afraid of public speaking. And one way you can help conquer that fear is by being involved in speaking groups such as Toastmasters. Another way is prepare your debate speech. Practice it so you're ready. People who do nominating speeches, they vary from, what am I here for? Or I had one nominating speech that said, he's a nice guy. and he did it on behalf of someone else who got elected. That was a very short nominating speech. And then I've had the others where they want to go on, and they drone on for I don't know how long. We have to cut them off at 2 minutes. We ask if there's any objection for another 30 seconds, and then the owners are nice. They give them 30 seconds, and they're still not done. And then finally, the hero objects. So you want to make sure you time your speech. Prepare it.